and thank you so much for joining me on the show today. But what do you make of what we can expect for the numbers coming up?
I expect the numbers to actually moderate on the previous month, just given the fact that we've seen a strengthening in the Nigerian currency, the naira, and we also expect that the floods, the impact from the floods, have already fed through and all of that. So the prices were already high, starting from a high place. So I think that they should moderate in terms of overall numbers, but still at elevated levels, and so you expect things to be fairly flattish, just given the fact that there's this thing called price resistance, because people's wages have not actually increased. So, if you look at what's actually been happening, it's not like production has actually increased in terms of supply of food, core inflation, and all of those kind of things. So basically, I expect prices to sort of be either flat or slightly ease on November's numbers.
Yeah, because when you look at in terms of a response that we had in terms of policy, we saw how the central bank was aggressive last year with its hawkish stance towards the tail end of the year last year. We're going to come about with another MPC meeting shortly in a few days. How do you think the monetary policy authority is looking at the numbers, and what's likely recommendations do you think they will make in the next meeting?
So I don't expect them to do anything aggressive with regards to interest rates. I expect them to leave it unchanged from where we were at from the last meeting with regards to rates. There could be some talk around, what happens with regards to the currency in terms of FX, like do they move it a little bit? I expect them to move it. I've been expecting them to move it for quite a while, to try and move it to converge to where the black market is. But they haven't yet actually done that, but I expect them to do something like that in the near future. But hopefully, I expect that from an interest rate perspective, I expect rates to remain unchanged.
Yeah, but still policy-wise, in terms of what more could be done in terms of aligning monetary and fiscal policy to address some of the major drivers that we're seeing play out here, what can we expect?
So I don't expect much, actually, when it comes to fiscal policy, because, the tenure is coming to an end for this government. By February, in less than 5 weeks, you're going to have the elections hopefully. Yeah. And so from that point on, the ministers are pretty much lame ducks. There's very little they can do in terms of implementing policy. And so I don't expect much on the fiscal side. On the monetary policy side as well, there are a lot of headwinds, that we've seen in the last couple of days or couple of weeks since Christmas. And so I don't expect much movement with regards to there being some alignment between, if you're trying to negotiate with someone or move with someone, and you're not sure the person is going to be there in the next 5 weeks.
Yep. But pointers for the next administration, more like?
I think that's, when people say pointers, a lot, between now and February when we have the elections, a lot of things could change. So, but overall, if you're looking at it holistically, I would say that there needs to be alignment towards growth. So meaning that how do we get Nigeria working again? Yeah. And so there has to be some level of policy coordination between the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, and try and see that, okay, whatever they're doing on the monetary side sort of aligns with the fiscal side. There are a lot of concerns around the level of debt that the country currently has, and how do we tackle that? And then also on the side of, okay, inflation, how do we deal with that and keep it and, move our focus from, high inflation levels to focusing on growth. 2023, everybody expects globally to see a year where a third of the world goes into recession. So the question is, how does Nigeria get on track to take advantage of its position from a population perspective, from building an economy, and also, with the new places that they're saying they're finding oil, how do we tap into this and actually make a lot more money, and also use that income to actually diversify our economy and improve the security situation in Nigeria.
Yeah, because I imagine how it is for someone like you sitting on the equities side, we're seeing this grim outlook from the multilateral players like the World Bank and IMF for what the future holds. And we're looking at inflation at these levels, but for investors now looking at the markets, how are they more or less positioning in terms of the equity space and the fixed income space?
So I guess it's all down to what happens with interest rates, right? When money is cheap, people buy equities. When money is expensive, people try to place their money in savings accounts or fixed deposits. So if we have a situation where rates stay stable or they come down, then you're going to see a lot more people buying into the equities market, and a lot of people are going to get bullish on that side of things. So I think that currently, people are still sitting on the fence, and you're going to see very little activity pending the outcome of the election in February.
Because we're looking at inflation on one hand, we're looking at an FX crisis on the other hand, and then we're looking at slow economic growth, and then all models up into a cost of living crisis that we're seeing play out here in terms of inflation here. And looking down the line in terms of a projection, what's your outlook for the first half of the year?
So
I know there's some uncertainties around the election, but
yeah, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the first half of the year, just simply because what goes up must come down. I think we've had periods of elevated inflation levels. I think that businesses are not able to raise wages to catch up with inflation. I also know for a fact, except if we change our laws, I don't think that we are allowed to change the minimum wage until after 5 years since 2019. So I don't expect much to change in terms of people's ability to spend significantly. And so I expect inflation to come down just because that price resistance exists. And so as a result, I think that overall, rates should actually come down. And also people are beginning to think, if you look globally beyond Nigeria's shores, right, rates are actually trending downwards. I see a lot of businesses still struggle despite that, just simply because it's more of the ability to pay that is driving it. It's not that there's excess supply of goods and services. And so it's a difficult time, in terms of growth, from a growth perspective.
Right, and we're still waiting for the official figures to creep in, but sadly, it looks like it's not going to happen in the time that your interview is going to be on. But thank you so much for keeping an eye on that so much. I'll be speaking to Oluseye Olusoga. He's the Managing Director and CEO of Parthian Partners Limited.